Hey guys, Daelen here from MA Performance. Today we're going to give kind of a breakdown for those of you that maybe haven't been around for the entire story of our 2017 Honda Civic Si. We're going to give you a rough breakdown of where it started, where we went, where we're going, kind of everything in between, and show you what we've learned with this car, what we've worked on, what we've done, what we've changed, what we've broken. It's a lot. And what we've fixed and what we kind of have in the pipeline for you guys. As you can see, the car is strapped on our dyno right now. We actually get, so this is one quick thing that I want to address. We get a lot of people that kind of talk about skinnies on the back, stock tires in the front. We do that to actually get traction on the dyno. The drag slicks just either get no traction or just get torn up and kind of get ruined. So that's why we keep that car in that configuration. We can kind of get into a breakdown of the car. We've been working on this car for a couple of years now, and we have gone through, I want to say a lot of different iterations, but not a crazy amount. So early on, what we started with was a stock engine car, stock fuel system, basically stock everything that we put a Borg Warner. I want to say we started with a 6558 or something along those, 6258 or something along those lines. To get that car, we got that car in a stock motor, stock fuel system, fairly much stock everything configuration, landing at about 410 wheel horsepower. We raced that car in that configuration with factory rear wheels, 17-inch slick up front, for about not a year, but a whole summer that we did that. And that got us kind of, I want to say we landed low 12s, high 11s with that setup. We found a lot of limitations. After that summer is when the car really started to get dug into a lot deeper and was a lot more reminiscent of the current setup you see right now. As we went through the vehicle, we found that that turbo kit that we had, we just couldn't find a Borg turbo that fell into the mapping that we wanted. So we moved over to Garrett turbos. We've been in a couple different sizes, from a 28 series turbo to currently the 3071, GTX 3071 that's on the car. We moved to that turbo. That helped us get upwards of that 500 horsepower range when we started drag racing the car. To get there, a big limitation that we found was going to be the fuel system. So we actually developed a port fuel rail adapter. So it's just a spacer that goes in between the intake manifold and the head. And we have just injector standoff so we can put port fuel injection into it. With that, we developed a controller based on an AEM EMS4, custom harness that was kind of adapted into the car to pull the ability to run the injectors, but also do a bunch of logging work for us, and some other kind of controls here and there that we did throughout the years. That fuel system is very reminiscent of what you see here right now. It's gone through a couple different iterations. We've made some changes, kind of some differentiating factors to it that we found, either things that work, things that didn't work, and kind of played with that throughout the years. So that first winter that we dug deep into the car, we stuck with a stock engine. We actually built a spare engine for the car, and then coming into the summertime decided we wanted to race it on a stock engine and go until it blew up. Because I know we have a whole series on that on YouTube that you can watch through us racing the car, blowing the car up on the stock engine, setting the horsepower record on the stock engine, the ET record on the stock engine. So as we went racing with the car, we found that the GTX 3071 put us at that 510 front wheel horsepower. That was based on a factory style intercooler, factory style engine. The head had valve springs in it. And that was about it. And the reason for that is we were finding the higher RPMs, we were seeing some valve float, which was causing some inconsistencies in boost pressures and the ability to actually hold that pressure inside of the engine. The fuel system, like I said, is something that we've had a lot of heavy focus on. So I'd say we're probably into about year 2 of fuel system development. And we can show you inside of the car, we're actually currently working on an in-tank solution also that's going to have a top hat that has a built-in feed and return. That's going to have all the factory hookups for it. Reason for that is there's just not a lot of room to modify the factory top hat. And we're working through a solution that's going to be a drop-in complete 450 pump with line kit, filter, everything you're going to need for that. On the car right now, we also found that the high pressure fuel pump was going to be a limitation when we were just doing high pressure fuel system only. So with that, we actually have a prototype pump that we've worked with some partners on that's been on the car and running for about a year, year and a half, just doing testing work. That pump we've currently proven to about 500 wheel horsepower on just the high pressure fuel system alone. We did find limitations and had to swap around on the injectors. One big thing to speak on is that almost everything on this car is custom. This is a couple of years worth of development work. Everything is kind of one-off or one of very few numbers. And this isn't what a normal customer would do. This is all for us to basically find the limits of different parts and products, test different ideas, and just kind of put it through the ringer and see what happens. So obviously we have our Stage 1, Stage 1 Plus, and Stage 2 kits that'll directly bolt on these cars, and there's a couple bolt-on turbo options and turbo kit options. So I do want to speak that most of the stuff is custom on this car, but that doesn't mean it has to be for yours. We have our port fuel system. If you're more of a DIY guy, that's available for purchase right now. You obviously have to plumb it all yourself, deal with all that side of it, which, coming from the feedback from you guys, we're working on a kit that handles that for you. As that kind of car lived that life that summer, so we actually were able to capture the ET record at that time. So that was a 1080 at 132 miles an hour. This was the fastest 10th gen Civic in the world for a decent amount of time, actually, on that setup. So that was going to be a stock long block, ported head, stock valve train other than the valve springs, stock cams, our turbo kit with a GTX 3071, our port injection kit with our custom fuel system and custom wiring harness to AEM. We did in that time actually have one engine failure, and we actually didn't lose a rod, we didn't lose a piston, we actually lost an oil pump. I'd have to look at the exact logs, but that was due to the fact that because of the gearing in the stock transmission and just everything we were running the size of the tire, we needed to rev the engine a lot. I was gonna say a little bit, but it was a pretty good amount higher than the factory rev limit. I wanna say we were revving this engine at times upwards of almost 10,000 RPM. And unfortunately the factory oil pump just didn't like that. So it actually just disintegrated on us. I think we have a video on YouTube if you do 1.5T oil pump from MA Performance. We actually worked with a company called Boundary oil pump gears that made a billet oil pump gear for us for this car, now available for sale. It's on our website. But that has, we've put it through plenty of abuse since then. We've had absolutely no issues, rock solid oil pressure. Coming out of that 1080, we decided that we wanted to go after the horsepower record. We actually swapped from a 3071 to a 3576, I want to say, roughly right around that sizing for a McGarrett. And we put a nitrous outlet 10-pound bottle in the car and did a direct port nitrous setup. We actually put a direct port setup and milled into our port injection adapter to run a direct port and then do the fueling with the AEM. We initially did that just to spool the turbo. Big turbo, small engine, just to kind of get her up there and not have to employ other strategies that the factory ECU just really couldn't do at that time. So we are using a K-Tuner V2 on the car. We've been between K-Tuner and Honda since day one. The K-Tuner kind of lives on this car more often than not right now. And it was important to us to stick with a factory-based ECU for as long as possible, purely because that's gonna be the most relatable to most customers. So in our quest to actually build the highest horsepower vehicle, we went with a little bit heavier nitrous spray. And I want to say we landed on roughly a 200 shot of nitrous directly into the backside of the intake. Right around that time was when the factory engine finally let go. So we don't have the dyno numbers to prove it, so I don't want to make a claim, but we landed somewhere in that range of, it was a 510 to 520 on just boost alone. Putting a 200 shot of nitrous at that, obviously it's not a one-to-one correlation, but we were probably in that high 600s, low 700 mark when the factory engine finally let go. Now, we're gonna do some content here later on talking about the engine, where we'd recommend building motors. I would not recommend doing that with your stock motor. We had a lot of very smart individuals that did a lot of work on this, and we expected it to blow up at any moment. So we can go a little bit deeper into the engines where we'd recommend making changes, because that's just not gonna be relatable. That's us pushing the limits, that's us pushing the boundaries so that you don't have to at the end of the day. We wanna learn what we can recommend to you guys by messing up, by blowing stuff up, by breaking things. And that's just kind of the name of the game when it comes to development cars. We wanna do things that are gonna be the most relatable to you guys and break all the things so you don't have to, and come up with solutions to make your lives easier. So with that, the car lived in that configuration for a little bit. We kind of had to set it off to the side, work on some other projects. And we took an engine that previously we built that had custom rods, custom pistons, a lot of custom components in it. And that motor had kind of been set off to the side for a little bit. In that time, some more shelf stock components started to come available, but we decided we wanted to put that motor in because we had some kind of tricks we tried with it to see if they would assist in some issues we were seeing with it. We put that motor in the car, put that car back on the dyno, and it's kind of lived in that 500 wheel horsepower mark for a couple of years doing fuel system testing. Now, I'm gonna back up really quick just a little bit. So when we were at the racetrack and we were drag racing the car, we went through more transmissions than we went through engines. So we would usually shear fourth gear. So when the car just loads up, it would just strip the teeth right off the gear. We have a small, lightweight 6-speed transmission from the factory. It works great at close to factory horsepowers, but with that much horsepower, that much torque, that much abuse, it just didn't like it. So we've gone through multiple different clutch iterations. We've gone anywhere from like a stock style FX 400 clutch to currently the car has an FX 725 in it. And that's gonna be a twin disc clutch with a lightweight flywheel. We found that that's the happiest for holding the power that we're working with. And the transmission, we actually worked with Sands, who has done transmissions for many, many race cars over the years, to develop a gear set for this car that uses factory synchros, factory style gearing, factory case, and it just assembles 1 through 4 is going to be a straight cut gear set with factory synchros, and then a factory 5th and 6th gear. That transmission is in this car, working through kind of some different options with it. Obviously there's always kind of some tweaks that you make with things as you develop them. So you're going to find that above that 400, 450 mark, depending on what you're doing with the car, the transmission is going to be a limiting factor. There's a couple different gear set options out there right now, anywhere from single gears to complete rebuilds. Kind of have your pick. Obviously it all comes down to budget at that point, but that is going to be something you're going to have to mess with. This car in particular right now actually has a custom intercooler setup on it. We wanted to do some testing for pressure drop, temperature changes on a much larger than factory core. So there's some custom work on the front end of the car that has that. It did help a little bit. We did see some changes, but for the most part, our factory style intercooler has done just fine when it comes down to the power upwards of that 500 mark. One of the big changes that we did make coming out of that first season was suspension, wheels, and tires. We saw that with the factory suspension, we're having a lot of oddities with the car. Didn't want to put the power to the ground. So we reached out to Fortune Auto and they actually built us a custom set of 510s to our specifications, specifically for drag racing this car. Basically just wanted to prevent weight transfer, wanted to keep all the weight over the front of the car as much as possible. And then we swapped from a 17-inch tire to a 15-inch wheel and tire combo with a much taller slick, taller as in sidewall. That just helped us put a lot more of the power to the ground, really helped with traction issues. 60-foot times dropped pretty significantly. And that was a key component in getting us to that 1080. We have a rear camber arm from Eibach just to straighten the car out, and tow arms from White Line just to make sure it's as parallel as possible, straight up and down. No toe, just least rolling resistance possible. So you're gonna wanna do that if you're gonna drag race the car, just to kind of keep your alignment specs in exactly what you want once you lower the car. The front end, mostly stock componentry. We have different bushings in the lower control arm to prevent it from moving. So I think it's the compression rod is technically what they're called. Interior of the car is fairly simple. So we actually have the nitrous bottle mounted, we have a fire bottle mounted, we have an acuity adjustable shifter that just helped us set it up for different drivers in the car. A much more crisp feeling shift. Overall, just a lot better to drive than the factory shifter. And then we do have a hydraulic handbrake in the car for staging the car. Loading up the transmission prior to launching just helps us with staging it and actually a little bit nicer on components when leaving the line. If you guys want any more in-depth looks into anything particular on this or any of the products that we're working on or that I talked about in here, obviously let us know. If you're like, Daelen, please slow down and like maybe be a little bit more concise with your talking, let me know that too. And I'm happy to kind of break down some different areas of the car a little more exact. Otherwise, we're really excited with where we're headed with this car. It's definitely not dead to us. We're still developing products, developing parts, developing systems with outside manufacturers. And I think we'll probably have some videos coming out on our engines that we have available for the car. So we are keeping some built short blocks in stock for this vehicle because we know that a lot of you guys are starting to go more and more power-wise, and obviously engines become a needed factor at some point, which we'll happily break down in some future videos. If you guys have any questions, post them below. Once again, thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us and this car. We really appreciate it. Without you guys, it's kind of nothing. It doesn't really matter. So if you have any questions, we have a full sales staff here on the phones, ready to answer your questions pretty much whenever you call. So reach out, and thank you very much.